Indeed, I am one of more than 10 lawyers from Germany, Israel, and Palestine that support this complaint filed by Palestinian individuals and 3 villages in the West Bank. The complaint explains that the German media group Springer, through a subsidiary, operates the online platform on which settlers find land that is owned by Palestinians. The settlement movement in the West Bank started about half a century ago with Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories in 1967. The settlements are residential communities built by Israeli settlers on land that international law recognizes as Palestinian territory, illegally occupied Palestinian territory. The settlements are illegal under international law, in particular the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits an occupying power from transferring its population into occupied territory. Settlements are primarily established by Israeli settlers, often supported by the Israeli government through subsidies, infrastructure development, and military protection. And there are also private organizations, including foreign donors, that fund settlement activities. Sometimes settlers act independently by creating so-called outposts, which even Israeli law initially deems illegal, but they are often later legalized retroactively. The tactics range from legal maneuvers to outright coercion. Land is often confiscated under pretext like security needs. Settlers use intimidation tactics against Palestinians, including physical violence, harassment, and destruction of property, to force them off their land. And then there are legal loopholes. Complex legal frameworks are used to justify land acquisition and settlement expansion. The justification for settlements often draws on ideological or religious claims. Many settlers believe they have a divine or historical right to the land based on biblical texts. Others frame settlements as necessary for Israel's security or as part of broader nationalist project, but all these narratives ignore the rights of Palestinians who have lived on this land for generations. The overwhelming evidence shows that Palestinians are not leaving their land voluntarily. Instead, they are being systematically coerced and forced out of their land through a combination of legal maneuvers, physical violence, and administrative restrictions. There are several mechanisms of coercion and forced displacement. For instance, Israeli authorities declare land military zones or nature reserves to justify its confiscation and then give it to settlers. Authorities also confiscate land under the guise of security needs or for the construction of infrastructure, such as roads, that are exclusively available for settlers. And then settlers also frequently engage in intimidation, destruction of property, and physical violence against Palestinians. Israeli authorities rarely prosecute these assaults. Such violence creates unbearable living conditions for Palestinians. It forces them to abandon their homes and lands. And there are also restrictive administrative policies for when Palestinians living in Area C apply for construction permits. Those are rarely granted. And then when Palestinians construct or expand their buildings, then that is deemed illegal and the constructions will be torn down. In addition, access to agricultural land is frequently denied or restricted by settlers or the military. Settlers also destroy crops, especially olive trees, which are also vital to Palestinian cultural heritage. And then there are movement restrictions, checkpoints, roadblocks, and settler-only roads that fragment Palestinian communities and prevent access to farmland, schools, and hospitals and workplaces. This isolation contributes to economic hardship and forces many families to relocate. The claim that anyone willingly sold their land in the past or today would dramatically oversimplify this complex reality, which is shaped by colonial frameworks, economic exploitation, and systemic violence. Land sales did occur under Ottoman and British rule, but the land was then bought from landlords that were absent and had let the land to Palestinian peasants. Palestinians themselves are very attached to their land. They are an agricultural people. Their land, the olive trees they grow, and cultural practices around it are all part of their identity. So today, acquisitions in the West Bank are entrenched in illegal occupation. The Fourth Geneva Convention prohibits any occupying power transferring civilians into the occupied territory. There is a Jordanian law from 1953 that also prohibits sales of land in the West Jordan territory to non-Arabs. Now, just in January, Israel advanced a bill to repeal that restriction from the Jordanian era. And this now is escalating questionable deals and forgeries. But the laws of an occupying power cannot legalize the taking of land by that occupying power. And the International Court of Justice, in its advisory opinion of 2024, reaffirmed that settlements are illegal. So what we see in the West Bank is certainly not a natural process of voluntary migration, but a systematic policy of dispossession that violates international law. Sure. From 1967 through 2017, over 200 settlements were established in the West Bank, according to the Israeli NGO B'Tselem. And since then, the number went up sharply, now approaching 300. More than 700,000 settlers live there now, one-third of them in East Jerusalem, according to the organization Peace Now and to the United Nations. Some settlements are small outposts with just a few families. Others are large towns with tens of thousands of residents. One of those is near East Jerusalem. The smaller outposts are often established without official Israeli governmental approval and then retroactively legalized under Israeli law as an actual settlement. The presence of these settlements really impacts Palestinians' lives. They split apart Palestinian communities. They are connected with roads that only settlers can use. And while Palestinians have to take detours and queue at checkpoints, they cannot easily get to other locations in the West Bank. So this settlement network makes the Palestinian state increasingly difficult to achieve. It has been widely criticized as a violation of international law, particularly Article 49, Paragraph 6 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. So the settlement expansion is more than a demographic or geographic issue. It undermines Palestinians' right to self-determination and exacerbates tensions in the region. The complainants in our case are 5 individual farmers whose land has been taken violently from them and their families, and 3 villages, Iskaka, Marda, and Taibe. They are in the Salfit and Ramallah governorates. Their population is between 1,500 and 2,300 inhabitants each. Many hectares from Iskaka and from Marda have been lost to the Ariel settlement expansion. Farmers are barred from using machinery on remaining land in Iskaka, and about 30 homes in Iskaka face demolition orders for unauthorized construction, so-called unauthorized construction. Settlers dump wastewater into village farmlands in Marda, and hundreds of olive trees have been destroyed in 2023 by settler attacks. Outposts block Palestinians' access to 12 hectares of olive groves, and settlers grave livestock on confiscated farmland. These are human rights violations. The rights to land, to property, and the right to water are being violated. Well, there are different scenarios. The transfer is often processed indirectly through settlement development companies. Also, individual settlers resell property after taking it or inheriting it. And to a lesser extent, also the Israeli Land Authority lists state land that had been confiscated. And also it is important to know that there are right-wing NGOs that play a role. They litigate to evict Palestinians, and then they list the vacant land on Judstein. Judstein is the name of that online platform. Judstein, Hebrew, meaning translated literally secondhand. And the properties are made exclusively available to Jewish settlers only. Listings for the Ariel settlement include clauses that exclude non-Jews. Many settlements have admission committees that screen buyers for their religion, and many listings say ideal for Zionist pioneers, or they use Hebrew terms like Judea and Samaria to appeal to Jewish nationalists. As the complaint explains, the Axel Springer Group owns an Israeli subsidiary. This subsidiary operates the listing signed Judstein, secondhand. And on that side, Jewish settlers find the land that was taken from Palestinians. And the complaint explains that the German Axel Springer head company has control over the business operations of that subsidiary. So we argue that the German head company must take reasonable measures to avoid illegal property listings, which are part of the land rights violations. Axel Springer SE is one of Europe's largest media corporations. It's headquartered in Berlin, Germany, and it operates two main business segments. First, it is the most influential media company in Germany. Springer publishes major newspapers like Die Bild, Welt, and it operates various TV channels and online news platforms. And then there's the second segment of Axel Springer's business, that is the classifieds division, which includes online platforms for job searches, real estate listings, and other services. This division operates globally and generates substantial revenue for the Springer Group. Exactly, yes. Judstein is part of that business segment of Springer. It's the online platform that is operated by an Israeli company called Coraltel Limited. And according to public company registries in Germany and Israel, this is a subsidiary of the Axel Springer Group. In the group structure, there are 4 intermediary companies, and eventually, as the complaint explains, Coraltel Limited is wholly owned by the head company Axel Springer SE. Oh, certainly they know the business operations of their subsidiary, and our international research team even established that the German Springer company even controls Judstein's business. According to public reports and excerpts from the company registries, the German Springer company owns 100% of the shares of the subsidiaries indirectly. And there was at times identity of staff among companies in the company group. Springer even operates a group-wide compliance management system, and there are policies and reports of the parent company that explicitly cover the subsidiary's business too, and so on. So there are more than enough reasons for the supervisory authority, BAFA, in Germany to investigate the case. And there is even strong evidence showing that managers within the Springer Group intentionally seek to accelerate the illegal settlement in the West Bank. An advert for Judstein in Israeli print media showed a map of Judstein listings with Palestine. being an annexed part of Israel. Moreover, Springer has a foundational company policy titled The Essentials, the Springer Essentials, which requires all employees to support the Jewish people and the state of Israel's right to exist. And don't get me wrong, it is absolutely right to protect Jewish people and the state of Israel. But to understand this to be a foundational duty of all staff members to actively engage in support of anything a state or its people do is unusual, even for a German company, and especially for a media company, which should be unbiased. The legal basis for this complaint is Germany's Corporate Due Diligence Act. This is a new law that came into force in January of 2023. And this law requires large German companies to identify and mitigate human rights risks in their global operations. Companies must address not only risks at their suppliers, but also, and even more so, risks involved in their own business operations, including risks caused by subsidiaries under their control. In this case, Axel Springer SE is accused of failing to fulfill its due diligence obligations concerning its Israeli subsidiary Coraltel Limited, which operates the Judge Stein platform directly. The complaint argues that Judge Stein violates land rights of Palestinians in the West Bank by listing property for sale that is located on land illegally confiscated from Palestinians. These transactions perpetuate the forced evictions and land grabs that have already taken place, and the operation of this platform encourages further land grabbing and settlements. Under the Due Diligence Act, Axel Springer SE is required to conduct a thorough risk analysis of the operations of its subsidiary. It should have identified that the listings on Judge Stein violate Palestinians' land rights. The company therefore must implement preventive measures, such as a Judge Stein user policy that prohibits listings related to illegal settlements, and the company must take remedial actions as well. But Springer has apparently failed to meet these obligations. The company was made aware of these issues through an investigative report published by journalist Hanno Hauenstein in The Intercept over a year ago. And this had stirred up public criticism, but Springer chose not to act. Instead, it claimed compliance with Israeli law and ignored its broader responsibilities under German and international law. So as the complaint argues, this failure to address human rights risks and take corrective action constitutes a clear violation of the German Due Diligence Act. Yes, without a doubt, this German act applies extraterritorially. The German due diligence law explicitly provides that the business operations of a company's subsidiary are part of the company's own business operations if the parent company controls that subsidiary, even if the subsidiary is incorporated and operates anywhere else in the world, in any other country. So this is what we call extraterritorial corporate obligations to respect human rights. International law is the bedrock of this case. The settlement enterprise on the West Bank violates foundational principles of international humanitarian law and human rights law, which bind all states, including Germany. And through the German due diligence law, corporations like Axel Springer SE must also respect these human rights. Let me outline three key pillars. Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits an occupying power from transferring its civilian population into occupied territory. The International Court of Justice has repeatedly affirmed that Israeli settlements breach this rule, most recently last year in its advisory opinion. That advisory opinion confirmed that settlements constitute an illegal annexation and perpetuates systematic discrimination against Palestinians. Second, there are other advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice and UN General resolutions that also make it clear that settlements and Israel's separation barrier in the West Bank, the so-called wall, violate international law and infringe Palestinian rights to self-determination, to property, and freedom of movement. In 2024, the ICJ ordered Israel to end its occupation as rapidly as possible, dismantle settlements, and to compensate Palestinians for damages. Critically, it also held that third states must cease all aid or assistance perpetuating the occupation, including corporate complicity. So if the German government takes international law seriously, it really has no choice but to hold corporations involved in the settlements accountable. And a UN Security Council resolution of 2016 condemned settlements as a flagrant violation of international law. And lastly, let me just mention that international criminal law, the Rome Statute, classifies transferring civilians into occupied territory as a war crime. States must ensure businesses under their jurisdiction do not enable violations, and Germany has done that by enacting the Corporate Due Diligence Act. Now, Germany also has to enforce it. In essence, international law doesn't exist in a vacuum. It demands concrete actions, like holding Judge Stein's listings, halting these listings to dismantle structures enabling apartheid and occupation. Germany must prevent and address violations stemming from Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory. According to the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights of 2011, Germany has a duty to prevent German corporations from contributing to human rights violations in Germany and abroad. This clearly has an extraterritorial dimension, as the Maastricht Principles also confirm. And Germany's Due Diligence Act codifies its international legal duty by requiring companies like Axel Springer to conduct due diligence to prevent human rights abuses in their operations, including subsidiaries they control. The law empowers supervisory authority BAFA in Germany, a German authority, to investigate and penalize non-compliance by companies. Failure to act on this complaint would undermine Germany's own legal framework and set a dangerous precedent for corporate impunity. The UN Security Council resolution of 2016 and ICJ's 2024 opinion emphasized that states aiding illegal occupations risk complicity in violations of peremptory norms of international law, such as the prohibition of apartheid and population transfer. If the supervisory authority BAFA ignores this complaint, Germany could face scrutiny under international mechanisms like the United Nations Human Rights Council or the International Criminal Court, which has jurisdiction over corporate complicity in war crimes. In short, Germany cannot claim to uphold international law or the rule of law while allowing its corporations to undermine those very rules. Legal consistency is not optional, it's a binding obligation. The complainants, they demand immediate action from Axel Springer SE. The complainants are asking the parent company to halt its subsidiary Judge Stein's role in enabling illegal settlements. Specifically, first, all West Bank listings have to be removed, unless sellers provide evidence that they are the rightful owners of the land. Second, Judge Stein's policies must be improved to block illegal listings and settlements. Land ownership must be verified. And third, a complaints mechanism must be accessible to victims to ensure that listings are suspended without undue delay. As the complaint explains, Axel Springer SE owns 100% of the Judge Stein business and controlling its compliance management system, and yet Springer has ignored repeated warnings and hidden behind claims of compliance with Israeli law. The complaint was filed at the BAFA, that is Germany's Federal Office of Economic Affairs and Export Control. And this is an authority responsible for enforcing the German Due Diligence Act. Under this law, the BAFA, as we call it, has three critical powers. It can order interim measures to be taken. This means that Axel Springer SE would be ordered to immediately suspend Judge Stein's listings in the West Bank while investigations are pending. This would halt new transactions on stolen land. And BAFA can then carry out investigations, interrogate employees, and order documents to be disclosed. And if it finds that the duty to mitigate risks was breached, it can order Springer a fine of up to 2% of the global annual turnover as a punishment. But BAFA, on the other hand, cannot order land that has been taken to be returned. To challenge land confiscations, Palestinians can technically address Israeli courts, but systemic bias and political interference undermines justice. The military courts enforce occupation policies. They are all part of the Israeli military. The trials are carried out in Hebrew language and Palestinians have limited legal access. Then domestic courts occasionally rule against settlements, for instance, ordering settlers to vacate stolen land in the Kirbet Sanuta. But enforcement is weak. So Israeli courts offer limited recourse. International pressure, like enforcing laws against companies enabling settlements, is absolutely critical to halt the systemic dispossession. If BAFA enforces the law and Axel Springer removes Judge Stein's 4,000 to 5,000 listings in the West Bank, then the commercial engine of illegal settlements would be disrupted. This would slow expansion because without easy online sales, settlers lose a key tool to market stolen land. It would also set a legal precedent. Corporations aiding human rights abuses can be held accountable under laws like Germany's due diligence law. That would be a clear signal. And it would be a precedent for other states too. Compliance with the ICJ's ruling of last year, which demands states prevent corporate complicity in occupation, would align policy with rhetoric. Existing settlements won't vanish overnight, that's clear, but halting new ones reduces daily violence and land grabs. De-escalation is a prerequisite for dialogue and eventual peace, and stopping Judge Stein's role in the land grabbing creates space for that dialogue. So legal accountability of corporations isn't a silver bullet, but it's a necessary step towards justice. Well, enforcing the law would at least mean that expelling Palestinians from their home and land would not seem so appealing anymore. If you cannot sell or buy real estate online, it is much more difficult to transfer the property, and hence the taking of the land would slow down a lot, obviously. Judgestein is the most popular listing site for finding real estate in the West Bank. When my team members in Israel checked yesterday, between 4,000 and 500 listings in the West Bank were online, depending if you include East Jerusalem or not. And every time a listing for stolen land is placed online, and every time that land is transferred, the property rights are violated anew. All these listings and the land and the sales and resales of land are land rights violations, and this has to stop. Springer would not be ordered to remove existing settlements, that's clear, but their expansion would slow down considerably. Further land rights violations would be stopped. Yes, absolutely. Stopping settlement expansion through corporate accountability would help to de-escalate daily conflicts over land in the West Bank. Those daily conflicts that we see now every day in the news. When Palestinians can't access their land or homes due to settlements, and settlers continue acquiring more territory through platforms like Judgestein, meaningful dialogue becomes impossible. This case is about systemic property rights violations and breach of international law. The ICJ's 2024 opinion confirms that settlements are illegal and must end. By enforcing the German Due Diligence Act against companies like Axel Springer, we call for accountability that can help break the cycle of violence. And peace requires equal footing for dialogue. This means ending the ongoing displacement of Palestinians and ensuring their property rights are protected. What exactly the grand solution will be, whether there will be two states or one state or an alternative governance system, that is not on us to decide, in my opinion, but it is on the parties directly involved themselves. They need to develop a solution in a respectful dialogue at equal footing. Our role as lawyers is to ensure international law is enforced so that such a dialogue becomes possible. Legally, this case is very strong. The German Due Diligence Act requires companies like Axel Springer to prevent human rights violations in their subsidiaries' operations. And the evidence demonstrated by the complaint shows that Springer controls the Judgestein business that directly enables land grabs, and the German authority, BAFA, has clear competence to order immediate suspension of the listings and impose fines. BAFA's initial response indicates that it misses the fact that the listings are within Springer's own business area, because the controlled subsidiary is part of Springer's own business enterprise, and the listings themselves are part of the land rights violations. A legal error that we hope BAFA will correct, as it undermines enforcement. The biggest hurdle here, we believe, is a political one. Springer dominates German media with newspapers like Bild and Die Welt and TV stations, and politicians from the parties in power, the Social Democrats and the Grüne Party, fear backlash if they challenge Springer. So success depends on BAFA resisting political pressure. If enforced, this case could set a global precedent for corporate accountability in occupied territories. So the law is quite clear, but political courage is lacking so far. The government is yet to enforce the law to show Germany's commitment to human rights over corporate power. Well, 3 months after filing the complaint, BAFA's response has been concerning. Rather than addressing the substantive human rights violations, BAFA indicates that it intends to reject the complaint, saying that the settlers' conduct is out of scope of Springer's due diligence obligations. The BAFA misses the point that Springer is indeed responsible for its subsidiaries' own human rights violations, and listing property wrongly taken by settlers on an online platform is part of human rights violations. Meanwhile, the situation in the West Bank has drastically deteriorated. The three villages that filed the complaint, Mada, Iskaka, and Taibe, are facing further displacements, and the constructions near Taibe are being expanded. Since October 2023, approximately 47 Palestinian communities have been forcibly displaced, affecting around 1,700 individuals. In 2024 alone, there were over 1,400 documented incidents of settler violence. Palestinians are being systematically denied access to hundreds of or thousands of dunams of agricultural land. Over 1,000 Palestinian structures were demolished in 2024 due to lack of building permits. That is a new record. And children are being assaulted in their homes during settler raids, and Palestinians are even being prevented from accessing medical care due to settlement expansions. The village representatives, the victims, and the NGOs that filed the complaint would like to discuss the case with BAFA, but BAFA does not appear to be interested in a meeting and stays inactive. Also, German political leaders, including the Green Party-led economics ministry and chancellery led by the Social Democrats Olaf Scholz, remain conspicuously silent. Although the ICJ has confirmed settlements violate international law and human rights continue to be systematically violated in West Bank. Well, BAFA is controlled by the Federal Ministry of Economics and Labor, by those two ministries. So eventually, politicians from the Green Party and Social Democrats decide how a case is handled. And there is a widespread fear of Springer among politicians. Politicians' careers depend on the Springer media's goodwill. It dominates the German media landscape, as I said. So it takes some bravery to uphold the law. There is this chilling effect where politicians avoid addressing cases like this to avoid backlash in the media. Eventually, this silence does undermine Germany's credibility as a defender of international law and human rights. Not to this extent. You know, the German government has long been explicitly against the settlements in the West Bank. For many years, the German government has called for a two-state solution. For decades. Our foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, in an interview in 2024, said that the settlements in the West Bank have to end in order to enable a two-state solution. And our Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said in an interview just in November that the settlements and the settler violence have to stop, period. And also in November, Germany voted in favor of a UN resolution that upholds Palestinian sovereign rights over their territory and natural resources. So I had thought that they cannot dismiss this complaint. Dismissing this case would expose blatant hypocrisy. If BAFA and the politicians in charge and their entire parties remain silent, they lose all credibility. They cannot do that. But so far it seems that I was wrong. And meanwhile, the violations currently intensify more and more. I believe in the power of international law to replace conflict with peace. Accountability and trust in the rule of law are essential for ending war and establishing justice. Legally, it is clear that Axel Springer SE must not contribute to settlers' illegal land grabs, as this violates international law. And it violates German law and even Jordanian law. Our team includes Palestinian, Israeli, and German lawyers who share the same view. Stopping corporate contributions to these crimes is the only non-violent way to achieve a just and sustainable solution. As a lawyer, I believe that legal tools are the most effective means for achieving peace. Dialogue at equal footing would be ideal, but until that becomes possible, we must uphold the law. And as Germans, we have a particular responsibility. Our history has understandably made it necessary for the Jewish people to establish a safe space. We must not ignore the current crisis in the West Bank. It endangers all lives there, including Jewish lives. Essentially, I decided to work on this case because I believe Germany must uphold human rights for all people and without fear or favor. My message to them would be demand and ensure that the BAFA applies the law. Simple as that. The Due Diligence Act and international principles like the protection of property are clear. Ignoring this case undermines Germany's credibility as a defender of human rights and international law. And don't think that this is a religious conflict. There are Jewish people, Christians, and Muslim Palestinians living in the West Bank, and not all settlers are Jews also. Some are Christian, Zionist, others are secular individuals. So this affects people from various religions. And aiding and abetting land grabs and forced displacement puts everyone in the region at incredible risk. German leaders should recognize that only by respecting human rights on all sides can we create a foundation for peace. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and it is time for Germany to uphold its stated opposition to settlements with action, not just words.